Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, our fellow charming listener and greenwashers assembling to listen to our episode 3. This is episode 3 of the Greenwashing Podcast. As you can see, we're going to talk about the ESG industry. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the job market right now. It's offering tons of jobs. And for the new generation, for Gen Z, and it's a charming opportunity for those freshly off having graduated from environmental science majors, environmental governance majors, and a lot of these different sustainability business majors that big companies are urgently seeking for. So Winston, tell us more about it.
So ESG is basically composed of three aspects: environmental, social, and governance. And before, it was used to be like a marketing with only the marketing department being involved. But now with all those regulations, the all those policies enforced, the whole company, for example, operation, finance, they're all involved in this. And so it really does impact the whole business ecosystem. Yeah. Terrence, will you have any examples for that?
Examples. So actually, a lot of companies right now inside of the EU, they do get regulated and audited like on the same framework, and they every year companies publish these ESG reports, right? But then what it is, it's not just doing charity, but it's also really a financial tool of risk mitigation. So this is looking at like long-term non-financial risk, especially in terms of like climate change, labor disputes, and like other regulatory fines, into how valuing the valuation of the company. And how the ESG industry work is mainly on a chain of information. So first of all, the companies, they report their data to the regulators, and then the rating agencies, they assign a score on these companies. And then after that, the asset managers package those into like financial tools such as green bonds and other funds, and investors buy into this financial product that they see if the business is truly sustainable in the long run. And basically what it does is that if a business is doing well, there's a green premium. So these high ESG ratings will reward firms with lower capital and make them worth more, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so companies are actually having a lot of like net zero pledges, and that's part of what we talked about in the last episode as well, regarding companies' promises to achieving green targets and also achieving really net zero carbon emissions, but they're actually not having the process or the plans transparent, and some of them are not even executing it. That's the problem, right? Actually, 92% of the global GDP is now covered by a net zero target, and carbon accounting job postings have surged over 200%. But then the net zero tracker also shows that nearly half of these corporate pledges are low integrity, so they're lacking interim targets and they rely heavily on offsets. So basically, companies have ambitions and they need people to achieve these ambitions, and in that process, they need the ESG industry. They need talent. So that's why big companies like Microsoft, their carbon negative ambitions, they are hiring tons of these employees coming from fresh off from universities, and these jobs wouldn't have existed 5 years ago. For example, California, they have strict environmental regulations regarding companies net zero commitments and also their emissions and all that. So they are actually actively trying to pull talents out of the universities, fresh out graduates, and then they're pulling them into big jobs. But then here comes the problem: is it really a boom in planet savers, or is it just promise makers? That's a big thing, because
with Alan's like point that net zero, a lot of companies do dream big, right? They say, oh, net zero 2030, net zero 2050, but like how many of them are actually making actions to back that up, right? And I think that's a really good point that Alan made, is that like although they have all of these promises, but of course all of them are just for show, like greenwashing, right? And they set these dates that seem very far away. Let's say like years ago, they would have said 2030, but right now it's just 3 years away, and they're promising all of this net zero without actually meeting the targets. So it's just false promises, a lot of them.
Yeah, and I think this is really. I mean, although there's this increase of greenwashing because of the huge market capital right here. Like, for example, the biggest ESG fund would be controlled by BlackRock, around 50 billion USD, and that's just a single company, right? And so we can basically see how big of a resource is encapsulated in that single ESG industry. And basically the financial sector right now is experiencing a massive 70% increase in greenwashing incident. And this is basically a reflection of how these growing capital attract these companies to lie about their ESG report, in their ESG report. But then with the proper policy, again, with ESMA from Europe and SEC from US, they basically enforce some really harsh fines and regulations. And so there's a 20% decrease in the financial sector and overall 12% decrease in the whole greenwashing incident. And this is called green hushing, because out of the fear of regulatory fines and also public backlash, so many companies, they entirely stopped talking about environmental goals, even they are meeting them. So yeah.
So Winston previously mentioned that the EU and the US both have these regulatory frameworks for ESG, right? But then there's a slight bit of a problem there, is that often these ratings might be a bit subjective. So for example, the EU one, there's a difference in something that we call materiality. So the way that they measure the sustainability metrics. So for example, the US ratings, they rely on single materiality, which means that they only measure how the world's climate risk affect the companies, like financials, whereas the EU ones uses double materiality, which means both weights. So measuring both the climate risk to the company's balance sheet, while also measuring the company's externalized costs to the environment. And a lot of these differences in the way that they measure it can impact how investors make their choices and how companies conduct their sustainability acts. And of course, that leads to a risk of green hushing, as Winston said. Yeah, and now I pass it on to Alan for his final remarks.
Yep, so it's time to wrap up, but that's a very insightful session we had. In the next episode, we're going to be talking more about greenwashing and how different regulations compare different continents, different governments, and on different hierarchies. And it's going to be a really insightful discussion like this one. So make sure you stay tuned and follow us on multiple big podcast platforms. And we hope to see you very soon in the next episode. So stay tuned, guys. Stay safe and take care. We'll see you in the next episode. Fellow greenwashers, we're signing off.